Part 1. You will hear a conversation between two people discussing different school options for a child. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen and answer questions 1 to 4.
Come in, Peter. It's nice to see you.
Thanks, Sandra. I've been looking forward to our chat. After we talked last week about the kids and their schooling, I've been thinking things through, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the choices available.
Well, there's quite a bit to think about. The main thing is that the school you choose depends on what you want your children to experience. Why don't you start by telling me what's on your mind?
I'm actually considering sending my son to an independent school. I've read that they tend to have more up-to-date facilities, and people say the teaching standards are pretty high as well.
That's often true, yes, but there are other aspects to think about too. For instance, independent schools follow a slightly different syllabus compared to government-funded schools.
How so?
Well, private institutions often put more emphasis on areas like technology and sciences, and they offer many optional activities like dance and photography. State schools generally stick to a broader academic program that includes a wider variety of subjects.
I see. That gives me something to reflect on. What about the fees? I've heard some private schools are extremely pricey.
They can be, yes, but some do offer bursaries or financial assistance. It's definitely worth checking.
Right. I'll look into that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
What about how many students are in each class? I've heard private schools usually have fewer kids per class.
That's usually the case. Private schools tend to have smaller class sizes, so the pupils can receive more individual attention from teachers. State schools often have more students per class, but also have additional support staff and programs for those who need extra help.
That's useful to know. And the teachers? Are they better at private schools?
Not automatically. There are excellent teachers in both private and state schools. It really depends on the particular school and its staff.
That makes sense. What about the school culture? I've heard private schools can be quite intense.
Yes, some can be very competitive, but they do offer a lot of enrichment options and clubs, which help students find their niche. Public schools, by contrast, often have a wider mix of students, so they're usually more socially diverse.
That's another thing to think about. How important is the school's location? Should I focus on ones near our house?
Absolutely. It's important for your son to be able to travel to and from school easily. And it's helpful for you too, in case you ever need to visit.
Got it. I'll factor that in. What about the school's status? How important is that?
Reputation matters. Try to find a school that's well regarded, both for its academics and its student environment.
Okay, I'll dig into that. What about the size of the school? Do kids generally do better in bigger or smaller schools?
That really depends on the child. Some thrive in small schools where they feel more seen, while others enjoy the variety and energy of a bigger student body, which usually comes with more clubs and sports teams.
That's great advice. Thanks a lot, Sandra. You've given me a lot to think about.
You're welcome, Peter. I'm glad I could help. I hope it all works out for the best.
That is the end of part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 1. Part 2. You will hear a speaker discussing how climate change is expected to affect farming and agriculture in Ireland. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 13.
Today I'm going to talk about the effects of climate change on farming in Ireland over the next 3 decades. In recent years, we've seen many articles on climate change and how it might impact human life. But most of these focus on environmental concerns, like how melting glaciers could influence sea levels, or how shifts in temperature may disturb wildlife and ecosystems. These are certainly important, but today I'll focus more specifically on how climate change is influencing food supply and farming. Ireland typically has a mild and rainy climate, and this has influenced the kinds of crops traditionally grown there. Barley is the dominant cereal crop, and there are also plenty of sheep and cattle farms. However, the climate is gradually shifting. Ireland has already warmed by 0.6 degrees Celsius since the early 1980s. And by the year 2055, predictions suggest an increase between 1.3 and 5.2 degrees Celsius. While this may not sound like much, it can have serious implications for agriculture. One change is that growers are now cultivating crops that previously couldn't survive in this region. For example, olive trees are now grown commercially in southern Ireland, and some even produce high-quality oil. And this type of change is expected to expand.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
But do you know, climate change involves more than just warmer temperatures. Rain distribution is also being affected. Ireland is now facing rainier autumns and drier springs, and these conditions are projected to intensify. This creates issues for farmers. In some regions, spring droughts have already caused reductions in crop yield. This is a bigger issue on land with sandy, loose soil that doesn't retain water effectively. This problem is causing especial harm to cereal crops like rye and barley. Still, it's not all negative. The shifting climate means some crops like chickpeas and lentils are now suitable for Irish conditions. Also, longer growing seasons mean more food can be grown, allowing farmers to increase their earnings. There are, however, challenges that growers cannot easily solve. One of the major issues is flooding, which has become a major concern for Irish farms. Increased rainfall has already resulted in more frequent floods, significantly disrupting agricultural activity. Another issue is the rising demand for water. Historically, most water was used for livestock, but today more is needed to irrigate fields. Since 1992, the volume of water used for this purpose has grown by 85%, and this number is likely to increase as the climate continues to warm and dry out. So, what can farmers do in response to these shifts? Well, there are several strategies. They could introduce new crops that thrive in the new conditions, or adjust the way they manage their land. Many are now turning to advanced technologies like precision farming, which helps reduce water waste and improve efficiency. However, these solutions often come at a high cost, which not all growers can afford. This is why it's vital that government authorities step in with programs to support farmers through this transition. One of the most important things farmers can do is to improve their soil condition. Fertile, well-maintained soil is key to productive farming, and it can also reduce the impact of climate change. For instance, soil with better health can absorb more moisture, lowering the chances of drought. It can also help manage excess water during heavy rains, thus reducing flood risk. How can this be achieved? Well, a few methods include minimizing tillage, which helps limit erosion, and using cover crops, which enhance both soil texture and nutrients. Still, the responsibility shouldn't rest solely on farmers. Policymakers must also prioritize soil quality and offer financial and educational support to help make long-term improvements. In conclusion, agriculture in Ireland is already being influenced by climate change, and this trend will continue.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear 2 students discussing ideas and preparation for a seminar in their Digital Innovations course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
So, Ryan, should we look through the possible ideas for our seminar in the Digital Innovations course and decide which one to go with?
Yeah, we need to pick something that'll interest the entire group, so that's at least a handful of people. What did you think of artificial intelligence?
I think it's a bit tough to present it in a way that keeps people engaged.
I thought the topic of smart gadgets might catch everyone's attention. But collecting enough solid content in a limited time might be tricky.
True. How about gene editing?
That one might be overwhelming. We'd probably find loads of data, but organizing it clearly would be a challenge.
Exactly. It wouldn't be simple to keep the audience focused. What do you think about bioengineering?
That might come off as too dry. Plus, I think we'd struggle to fully understand it ourselves.
Then why don't we go with a new application of virtual reality? I reckon it'd be exciting.
Yeah, I'd enjoy researching that. It should be straightforward to structure, and I think the class will like it too.
Great. Let's lock it in. I also think we should finish with some ethical considerations.
Agreed. Let's jot down the sections we need to include.
Okay. I think we should kick off with a clear explanation and a short overview of its development. I'll handle that.
All right. Then we need to explain the mechanism, how it functions, and I'm not sure I can make that clear. Do you want me to try?
No worries, I'll take care of that part. Then you can present the advantages of this new VR application.
Sure, I can do that.
Do you want to go over the ethical considerations?
I'm a bit unsure. That sounds quite complex.
I'll cover that then. I find those topics easier to digest than the benefits.
All right, thanks.
I'm heading to the media center. I want to look for some material on this new VR use case.
I don't think we'll need to use physical books. I'm pretty confident the internet will have all the info we need.
I'm not so sure. I think it's smarter to rely on published sources.
I disagree. Most books are out of date, and they'll take too long to go through.
Fair point. We can always grab a book or two later on if it turns out we need more detail.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
How do you think we should format our seminar?
At first, I thought a straightforward lecture might work, but now I feel it could be a bit dull. What if we turned it into a dialogue between us?
That's a clever idea. It'll be more relaxed and feel more like a discussion than a formal lecture. What about visuals? Should we use slides or try something else?
Definitely slides. I think some graphs would be best for explaining developments and comparisons. Diagrams could also help, though sometimes they can be too detailed.
Got it. We'll decide which ones to use once we've gathered our material. What's your game plan for the prep work?
I'll start with the evolution of VR. There's a lot available online, so I'll stick with a few trusted websites. I might squeeze in a couple of YouTube documentaries if I have time.
Sounds good. I'll focus on the advantages, like in education, medical training, and even architecture. I'll try to select the most relevant ones.
Awesome. If I hit a wall with anything, I'll contact my tutor. She's super helpful with anything technical.
Good idea. Oh, and when's the final deadline? Is it still next Friday?
No, it's earlier than that. We need everything ready by Wednesday.
Right. Better get moving then. Let's get cracking.
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 3. Part 4. You will hear a lecture discussing common workplace problems and strategies for improving team communication and morale. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
In today's session, we'll continue exploring organizational behavior by examining what can go wrong when a department tries to handle a challenge at work. I'll share a few scenarios of typical workplace issues, and afterwards, I'd like you to think about difficulties you've faced personally in professional settings so we can have a group discussion. Let's begin with the fairly typical issue. Some team members avoid admitting fault when something goes wrong. You'll hear them say things like, "It wasn't my responsibility," or "I wasn't involved in that decision." So why do individuals shy away from taking the blame? Often it's because they're nervous, worried they might lose their position, receive criticism from their supervisor, or even be transferred to a less favorable role. These anxieties are common and can impact group morale negatively. Another situation that arises quite frequently is interpersonal conflict. Colleagues sometimes clash because of contrasting temperaments or simply because they have different working values. Perhaps they approach deadlines differently or disagree on which assignments should take priority. In some cases, they just don't connect on a personal level. Regardless of the cause, these conflicts should be addressed early to prevent them from affecting productivity and team cohesion. A further complication is lack of information sharing. For instance, if one person isn't aware that a coworker is already tackling a particular job, they may begin the same task independently. This duplication not only wastes resources, but may also lead to misunderstandings and tension among staff. That's why effective communication methods must be in place, ensuring everyone is informed about their assignments and responsibilities. So, how can we reduce the chances of these issues developing? First, it's crucial that team roles are clearly outlined. Every member should have a well-defined job description and understand exactly what's expected of them. Scheduling routine check-ins can also help team members bring up any difficulties and resolve them promptly. Second, it's essential that everyone feels involved. When individuals sense they are part of a supportive unit, their engagement improves. Acknowledging people's input and celebrating their milestones can strengthen the sense of belonging. At the same time, addressing disputes promptly and impartially is vital to maintaining harmony. Lastly, fostering a strong team culture is key. You want to build an environment where individuals are confident sharing feedback and where collaborative thinking is promoted. It's also helpful to have a shared vision so the group stays aligned and committed to reaching the same objectives. That gives us a general idea of common teamwork obstacles and strategies for managing them. Now, I'd like each of you to reflect on a specific issue you've come across in a work setting. We'll go around and talk about them.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 4.